Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow and welcome to this third in our video series on how to build a better data governance, compliance, security and data management strategy. As you've seen in our previous videos, we're going to be using NetApp's Data Sense tool to help us to do that. Now in this third video, we're going to focus on how we use Data Sense to help us develop better data governance policies, and by using the information it presents, give us not only insights but to turn them into actionable insights. Now, before we start, you'll notice we've added some additional data to our demonstration environment, and that's just to provide some more meaningful demos during this video for you. So how then do we turn the governance information that Data Sense presents and use it to improve our data management? So let's dive into the governance dashboard and let's find out what useful information that we've got there that we may be able to turn into actionable information at some point later. So straight away we can see we've got some savings opportunities here. So Data Sense has looked across our production data repositories and has identified things such as stale data, so information that's not been accessed in over 3 years, non-business data, so information that perhaps we don't use day to day, and things like duplicate files where we've got multiple copies of the same information. You'll also see on the right hand side we've got this concept of policies. So these are predefined within Data Sense. And these policies will help us look for potentially high risk information across our data set. So for example, where we've got a high amount of personal data within a file, or where we've got files with large amounts of email addresses. All of these are potentially full of sensitive information that we need to be extra cautious with. And we'll talk a bit later about how we can use those policies and customize them. You'll also see as we scroll down we can have a graphical overview of the type of data we have in our main repositories. We've only got a couple of repositories in this environment, but you can see here, we can see quickly non-sensitive data, personal information, sensitive data. And on the right you can also see here where we've got risky data, so data that's got fully open permissions and can be accessed across the organisation, something we may wish to address. As we scroll down you can see here that we can get a profile of the kind of information that we have. So for example, the age of data based on when it was last modified, or when it was created. And further across on the right you can see the types of files that we have. So you can see the vast majority of our files are in that kind of 1 kilobyte to 1 megabyte size, but again we can use that to help to plan the type of storage and data repositories we have in the future. And as we scroll down the bottom here you can see that we have other very valuable information, and that's the information around data classification. And data classification is crucial for those starting to build out their data strategy procedures, whether that's policies, whether that's processes, whether that's data loss prevention rules, archiving, retention policies, what have you. Because data categories allow us to be very specific based on the type of files that we have. So you can see here that Data Sense has gone away and has got some default categories and has applied those categories to the data we have to formulate these initial classifications. So as you can see here, we've classified some data as financial invoices, images, spreadsheets and documents. And then alongside that we can see we've got different types of file types across our organisation. So lots of back office files, docx's, PDFs, spreadsheets. And then further to the right we've got this kind of labels of files, and we'll talk about labels in a future video. So as we scroll back up you can also see that while the dashboard gives us lots of high level information, we can get a little bit more information on the data that we've seen presented here by downloading our data mapping overview report. So there from the dashboard you can see the dashboard straight away allows us to start to build a little bit of a picture of the data that we've got, where we've got sensitive information, where we've got high risk information, and we can start then to look at, well, how do we take that information and do something useful with it? How do we action it into some level of data management? So for example, why don't we start here with stale data? So if we click on this optimize storage button, this brings us into the investigations tab. So we saw there on the dashboard that we had 233 bits of stale information. Well, the investigations tab shows us what that information is. So as you can see as we scroll up and down the 233 items here, we can also find additional information about those files that are identified as stale. So we can see in this case, does it involve personal information? Has it got sensitive information in there? Does it include information about data subjects? This might help to colour the way that we deal with that file. And then if we go into more detail on the file, we can see there things like its last modified date. So we can see here that this file has not been accessed in over 6 years. We can see the production file path that it resides in. We can see the type of file it is, a spreadsheet in this case. And on the right hand side you can see that we've got some tasks that we can carry out against that file that we've discovered through this stale data policy that we've got. So for example we could add a tag to the file such as stale data, and we can use that tag then to identify this file in future, or maybe build policies that look for this specific tag. You can see we can assign this file to another Data Sense user. So I'm the only user in this particular demo environment. We would have multiple users here. I could assign this file to one of those users. They could then take a look at that file and decide what policy or action to take. You'll also see that we've got some file actions that we can take, kind of standard file actions. So for example, we could choose a file that's not been accessed for 6 years. We could choose to delete that file. Or we could choose perhaps to copy that file to another location so that somebody could then take a look at those files in this alternate location before we decided what to do with it. But what's normally happen with a file such as this, where we identify things like stale data, is we may choose to move that file to some kind of archive repository. Now it's worth noting at this stage with Data Sense, we can only move files to repositories that are NFS repositories. Now this doesn't mean in a multi-protocol world that Windows users will no longer be able to access that file, but we just need to be aware that we must present NFS before we move a file to a potential location, and if we want users that are non-NFS users to use that, we need to make sure we apply other protocols such as SMB so our Windows users can see it. So just something to bear in mind with Data Sense. So for example here then we can access and enter our NFS data store. So we've got a couple that we've used previously, so we'll choose the archive one. We click on move file at this stage and you'll see that this file then successfully moves into that new repository. So if we just pause the playback for a moment, it's worth understanding at this stage as well that while we're talking about this as an archiving policy, Data Sense is not an archiving solution in the traditional sense. So it's not going to leave a stub file or some kind of hard link in the original location. It is literally going to do a move operation. It's going to take that file, it's going to copy it to a new location, and it's going to delete it from the source. So it's a great way of us being more efficient in the way that we store data in our production environments, but just bear in mind it's not an archiving solution where users are going to then find those files in their original locations. So let's carry on with the playback of this video. So you can see here there's some bulk things that we can do as well. So we could select 20 files that we can see on the screen at any one time and apply actions to those. We've also got an option there to select all of the files within this data set, and we can then apply actions to those files as well. So that's really useful and valuable for us to be able to do that in large numbers. One of the other things that we can do that's really important to an organization here is that we can customize these policies, customize these search. So this is based on the stale data policy, but we could decide that we don't want to look at all data, for example. So we could go to our working environment. You can see here we've got OneDrive and our on-premises data set. So we could say we'll just look at the stale files on our on-premises data set. So we could carry that out, and we can now see that we've now only got 92 items that are stale, but we could create a brand new policy here as well and use this policy to better refine the information that Data Sense has by default. So for example, we could create a policy here that just looks at stale data in our local storage repositories. And then there's some actions that we can take against that. We could maybe apply a label, and as we've mentioned, we'll talk about labels in a future video. We could automatically delete those files. So if we see stale files on our local repositories, we just choose to delete them. Or we could just send an email that notifies other users who are managing the system that we may well have information that's in there. And that's a really important thing for us to be able to do, because while Data Sense has some great and useful standard policies that can allow us to very quickly get an understanding of the information we've got, and that's highly valuable when you deploy solutions such as this, because we want to be able to recover that information quickly and gain actionable insight really quickly into our data sets. But the more we use tools like this, it's important that we have that kind of flexible customization so that we can build policies and build processes that better reflect our environment and the way that we want to manage our data. So hopefully you can see here how Data Sense allows us to start to build a better understanding of our data, how much we have, what it is, where it is, and when or if it's used. And this is essential for those who are looking to develop better data management, because without these base bits of information, it's almost impossible to build an effective strategy. You can see that the information on just this first screen provides us with a lot of insight from which we can start to plan archive strategies, better understand the sensitivity of the data that we have for our data loss prevention policies, and where we may be able to see security issues in our data. And beyond that, it allows us to action that information and carry out some basic tasks that help us to start to enhance our data management capabilities. In the next video, we're going to take a look at Data Sense's compliance capabilities to ensure that we're using data appropriately and reducing risk in our organisation. So if you've got any comments or questions, do leave them in the comments section below the video. If you enjoyed the video, do give it a thumbs up, and do watch out for our next video. To make sure you catch that, then do subscribe, and that next video will be out soon.